Number 10, the sea serpent's warning. You've probably seen some old maps with wild sea monsters drawn on them. We're not talking about a cute little kraken on the side, but full-on dragons, sea serpents, and giant squids coiled around entire continents. For a long time, we just assumed these were the result of bored cartographers with overactive imaginations. But that's like saying the people who painted the Sistine Chapel just ran out of ceiling and decided to doodle. The truth is far creepier and more practical. The sea serpent wasn't just a fantasy, it was a cartographic code. These creatures were a way for mapmakers to warn sailors about uncharted, dangerous territory. They were basically the 15th century version of a skull and crossbones sticker on a high voltage box. It meant, here be dangers. Whether that danger was a shallow reef, a deadly current, or simply a place no one had ever come back from. These maps were also a way for kingdoms to claim territory they had never even visited. Imagine dropping a pin on Google Maps and claiming Antarctica just because you drew a polar bear on it. The sea monsters were also a way to communicate a lack of knowledge, a chilling honesty about the vast unknown. A map with a bunch of meticulously drawn borders and a terrifying dragon in the middle of the ocean told you exactly what was known and what was not. It's a beautifully ironic warning. We're not lying to you, but we also have no idea what's out there. Probably a sea monster, so don't go. Number 9, the land of dog-headed men. Imagine you're a 13th century explorer trying to chart the edges of the known world. All you have to go on are the stories you hear from the people you meet. And if you're charting India or a faraway part of Africa, you might hear about the cynocephali, the dog-headed men. These weren't just fables told around a campfire. They were considered real, documented inhabitants of the world, and they were drawn onto maps with the same level of seriousness as lions or elephants. These maps show them hunting, fighting, and even living in small, dog-headed communities. The existence of these creatures was backed up by ancient texts from the likes of Pliny the Elder and Marco Polo. Pliny even claimed they had a real functioning kingdom. Now, the modern, boring explanation is that people probably just misinterpreted stories about native people wearing animal masks for rituals. But it's more fun to think that map makers were just so desperate to fill in the blank spaces on their maps that they would believe anything. The fact that the maps depicted them with such detail, even showing them with spears and clothes, shows a certain level of commitment to a myth. This wasn't just a simple drawing. It was an act of sincere belief. Your brain, for a moment, has to grapple with the thought of a whole civilization of dog-headed people just living their lives right outside of your town's border. Number 8, the island of California. Imagine, for a second, you pull out a modern map and find a giant empty space where California should be. Then you realize it's a giant island, just floating out there in the Pacific Ocean. While it sounds like something from a rejected science fiction movie, this was a perfectly serious geographical belief for over 200 years. It all started with a Spanish novel in the 16th century that described California as an island full of Amazons and gold. The book was a hit, and explorers, bless their optimistic hearts, took the fiction as fact. Subsequent maps, drawn by people who had never set foot anywhere near the place, simply copied the error. Even when later explorers, like Cortez, realized it was a peninsula, the island of California was too popular to die. It kept showing up on maps for centuries, like a stubborn geographical phantom. European mapmakers were so committed to this fictional landmass that they would literally argue with explorers who claimed it wasn't an island. It's a beautifully absurd demonstration of how human belief can override physical reality. The idea of a magical, deep, golden island was just too good to give up. Eventually, a Spanish expedition in 1746 conclusively proved it was connected to the mainland, and the island finally reluctantly disappeared from the map. It's almost sad, isn't it? A whole state just lost at sea for 200 years because of a fictional story. Number 7, the land of endless winter. If you look at old maps, especially those from the ancient Greeks and Romans, you might see a place called Ultima Thule, or simply Thule. It wasn't just a place, it was the edge of the world, a land of perpetual ice, darkness, and maybe even a few angry giants. This was the northernmost point anyone had ever traveled, the final frontier of humanity. The Greeks believed it was a land so cold that the sun would refuse to rise for a full month, where the ocean would become a frozen, slushy mess. Now, modern historians think Thule was probably a real place, maybe Iceland, Norway, or one of the Shetland Islands. But the map makers didn't just draw an island. They drew a symbol of the great unknown, of the terrifying, untamed forces of nature at the absolute edge of their knowledge. They were mapping not just geography, but their own fears. What's creepy isn't the legend, but the fact that a relatively normal, chilly place was mythologized into the final uninhabitable boss level of planet Earth. It's the kind of thing that makes you wonder what places we've mythologized today, believing them to be impossibly strange just because we haven't personally been there yet. Number 6. Here be dragons. You've heard the phrase, and you've probably seen it on a cheesy graphic in a documentary, but the reality is much more chilling than a simple monster doodle. The Latin phrase was hic sunt dracones, and it was a direct, unapologetic confession of pure ignorance. It wasn't a warning about literal dragons. Instead, it was a shorthand for, we have no idea what's in this part of the world, and we're not even going to guess. It was a blank space, but with a terrifying twist. They were essentially saying, this is where the map ends. The rules of civilization, of geography, of physics might not apply here. Do not pass go. Modern maps are an anathema to this. Every inch of our world is meticulously cataloged, measured, and assigned a street number. We have a name for everything from the tallest mountain to the deepest trench. We have eliminated the great unknown. On an old map, the unmapped parts were an honest reminder that humanity's grasp on the world was precarious at best. The scariest thing on an old map wasn't the dragon, it was the blank space right next to it. It was the acknowledgement that there were still places where you could get so lost, you might as well have fallen off the edge of the world. Number 5. The Land of Giants. Imagine a map with a meticulously drawn coastline, a few major cities, and then in the unexplored jungle, a few sketches of people with heads on their chests or who stand 20 feet tall. Old maps are full of them. We're not talking about a quick doodle, but detailed illustrations of entire civilizations of cyclopses, giants, and men with feet so big they could use them as umbrellas. The belief in these grotesque races wasn't just a simple rumor. It was a deeply ingrained part of the medieval worldview, passed down from ancient texts like Pliny the Elder's Natural History. These monstrous races were placed on the maps to signify the exotic, the wild, and the dangerous. They were basically the 15th century equivalent of an enter-at-your-own-risk sign on a dusty old factory. The creepy part isn't the thought of a giant man. It's the fact that for a long time, humanity sincerely believed there were entire societies of them just a few hundred miles from where they lived. It makes you wonder what kind of monsters are on our maps today. We might not draw literal giants, but the political maps and social narratives we've created are just as full of terrifying, exaggerated caricatures of people we don't understand. Number 4. The Sea of Darkness. If you look at some of the oldest maps of the world, especially those from the Arab world in the Middle Ages, you'll find the Atlantic Ocean isn't given a name but a title, Bahr al-Zulumat, or the Sea of Darkness. Now, this isn't just a poetic name for a gloomy body of water. It was a serious, chilling, and scientifically informed warning. Mariners believed this ocean was literally unnavigable due to its monstrously strong currents, lack of wind, and thick fog. It was considered a one-way trip, a place where ships would simply drift until their crews starved to death. On these maps, the darkness wasn't a metaphor for mystery. It was a physical, terrifying reality. These were the maps that showed the limit of human endurance, not just human knowledge. This wasn't a monster you could slay or a legend you could debunk. It was a geographical fact that kept an entire continent separated from the rest of the world. It's a beautifully terrifying thought that the greatest obstacle wasn't a dragon or a whirlpool, but a body of water itself, a silent, swirling void that simply refused to be crossed. We now call it the Atlantic Ocean, and we cross it every day. But next time you're on a plane flying over it, just remember its old name and the very real terror it used to inspire. Number 3, the Ghost Islands. We all know that feeling when your GPS glitches out and sends you to a field. Imagine that, but on a global scale. Old maps are littered with phantom islands, land masses that were charted, named, and believed to exist for centuries, only to eventually disappear. The most famous of these is High Brazil, a mythical island off the coast of Ireland that was believed to be shrouded in mist, only appearing once every 7 years. It showed up on maps from the 14th to the 19th centuries, drawing explorers and treasure hunters on futile quests. It was a lie that refused to die. Another example is Sannikov Land, a phantom island in the Arctic Ocean that was supposedly sighted by a Russian explorer. It was added to maps, and expeditions were launched to find it, only for them to find nothing but ice floes and open water. These ghost islands weren't put there out of malice. They were the result of honest-to-goodness human error, fog banks mistaken for land, misplaced icebergs, or just a little bit too much wishful thinking. These islands are creepy because they are a testament to how powerful a belief can be and how desperately we want to find something new and magical in the world, even when it's not actually there. Number 2, the unmovable continent. Have you ever looked at a map of the world and just had the feeling that something was off? Maybe it's a bit top-heavy? Well, for thousands of years, people felt the exact same thing. Ancient Greek geographers looked at the known world, a bunch of land masses in the northern hemisphere, and decided there had to be something huge in the south to balance it all out. This wasn't a rumor or a myth. It was a pure intellectual assumption. They named this hypothetical land Terra Australis Incognita, or the unknown southern land, and for centuries, it was drawn onto maps as a fact. This wasn't some blurry phantom island. It was a continent-sized void, waiting to be found. Every time an explorer went south and didn't find it, they just made it a little smaller or drew it a bit farther away, but the idea never went away. It was a lie born not of fantasy, but of pure, stubborn logic. The creepy part is that this imagined landmass was so ingrained in the human consciousness that it literally warped our perception of the world. It wasn't until the 18th century that explorers like Captain Cook proved that if a continent existed at all, it was a tiny, frozen one at the very bottom of the world, Antarctica, a far cry from the temperate, fertile land people had been imagining. The fact that an entire continent existed for thousands of years just because it sounded right is a testament to how badly we want to believe the world makes perfect sense. Number 1, the cartographer's lie. Imagine you're driving down a long, dark road at night. You're following your GPS, and it tells you to turn left onto a street. But when you get there, the street isn't real. It's just a field. On old maps, this wasn't a glitch. It was a deliberate trap. Cartographers in the past would intentionally put fake roads, rivers, or even entire towns on their maps. They called them paper towns or copyright traps. These weren't mistakes. They were intellectual booby traps. The idea was simple. If a rival mapmaker copied their work, they would also copy the trap, and the original mapmaker would have all the evidence they needed to prove plagiarism. What makes this so creepy is the cold, calculated betrayal of trust. The map, which is supposed to be the one thing you can rely on to guide you through the world, was secretly a lie. It was a deliberate act of sabotage designed to get you lost. While it might have protected their business, it also introduced a chilling level of doubt. Every road, every river, every town became suspect. It's a reminder that even the most objective scientific tool can be corrupted by human pettiness and a complete disregard for the truth. It makes you wonder what kind of digital paper towns we're navigating today, and whether we've stumbled down one of those false paths without even knowing it.